Control your mind or your mind will control you. You think you're in control. You think the voice in your head, the constant commentary, the running narrative, the endless loop of thoughts. That's you. That you're choosing what to think, what to focus on, what to worry about. But here's the truth most people never face. You're not thinking your thoughts. Your thoughts are thinking you. Right now, in this moment, your mind is running programs you didn't install, repeating patterns you didn't choose, replaying conversations that already happened, rehearsing scenarios that never will. And you, the real you, the observer, you're just along for the ride, mistaking the passenger seat for the driver's seat. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years ago. They understood that the untrained mind is a tyrant. It drags you into the past. It throws you into imagined futures. It amplifies fears. It creates enemies out of shadows. And if you let it run unchecked, it will destroy everything. You're trying to build, but there's another way, a harder way, the way of the disciplined. If you're ready to stop being owned by your own mind, stay. Because what comes next isn't theory, it's war. The war for sovereignty over the only territory that actually matters, the space between your ears. Context, 0:30 to 2:30. Look around you, look at the chaos. People scrolling mindlessly through feeds they hate, unable to stop. People trapped in mental loops, replaying arguments, nursing grudges, catastrophizing about futures that will never come. People whose anxiety has become their baseline, whose racing thoughts have become their normal, whose inability to sit still with themselves has become an identity. This isn't freedom, this is captivity. And the cage isn't external, it's internal, built thought by thought, habit by habit, reaction by reaction, until the prison is so familiar it feels like home. The modern world is designed to hijack your attention. Every app, every notification, every piece of content is engineered to bypass your conscious choice and trigger your impulses. And most people don't even notice it happening. They think they're choosing to check their phone. They think they're deciding to worry. They think they're in control. But control is an illusion when your mind is running on autopilot. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote this in his private journal. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize that and you will find strength. Not, you should have power, you have power. Right now, this moment, the power is already yours. The question is whether you're using it or wasting it. Because here's what most people don't understand. Every moment you're not actively directing your mind is actively directing you. It's pulling from old programming, childhood wounds, social conditioning, evolutionary impulses designed for survival on the savannah, not success in the modern world. Your mind will catastrophize because your ancestors survived by assuming the worst. It will crave instant gratification because delayed reward was uncertain. In a world where tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, it will seek tribal approval because exile meant death. These are features, not bugs. Your mind is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is, the design is 10,000 years old, and the world has changed. But you can reprogram it, you can intervene, you can become the programmer instead of the program. That's what this is about, not positive thinking, not affirmations, not pretending your mind isn't chaotic, but developing the skill, and it is a skill, to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, to feel your emotions without being directed by them, to experience your impulses without obeying them. That's mental sovereignty, and it's the foundation of everything else. Let's break it down. 1. The law of awareness. You can't control what you don't notice. Read that again, because most people are so identified with their thoughts that they can't see them. They are the anxious thought. They are the angry reaction. They are the spiral of self-criticism. There's no separation, no space, no awareness, and without awareness, there's no choice. The first law of mental mastery is simple but brutal. You must learn to observe your mind without being your mind. You must create distance between the thinker and the thought, between the observer and the observed. This is what the Stoics called the view from above. The ability to zoom out and watch your mental patterns like you're watching weather systems from space. Not judging them, not fighting them, just seeing them. Because here's what happens when you can see your thoughts. They lose their automatic power over you. When you notice, I'm anxious, instead of just being anxious, you've created a gap. And in that gap, there's freedom. The freedom to ask, is this thought true? Is it useful? Does it serve where I'm going? Most people never ask those questions because they never create the gap. They go from trigger to reaction in milliseconds. Someone says something, their mind interprets it as an attack. Anger surges, words come out, damage is done. And only later, sometimes much later, do they think, I shouldn't have said that. But by then, the moment is gone. The disciplined person operates differently. Trigger happens. They feel the surge. But there's a pause, a breath. A moment of recognition. This is anger. This is the feeling of being disrespected. This is my ego reacting. And in that recognition, they've stepped outside the automatic loop. They're no longer the anger. They're the one watching the anger. And that changes everything. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what most people are living. Unconscious patterns directing their choices while they mistake reaction for decision. They think they're choosing their responses when really they're just executing old code. But you can change that. Starting now, starting with this simple practice. Notice your thoughts. When you're in traffic and you feel frustration rising, notice it. I'm feeling frustrated. When someone criticizes you and defensiveness kicks in, notice it. I'm feeling defensive. When you're scrolling and you can't stop, notice it. I'm caught in a dopamine loop. You don't have to fix it immediately. You just have to see it. Because awareness is the prerequisite for change. You can't redirect what you can't observe. And most people go their entire lives never truly observing their mental patterns. They just live inside them, assuming that's just how I am. But it's not how you are. It's how you've been programmed. And programs can be rewritten. The practice is simple but not easy. Throughout your day, pause, check in, ask yourself, what am I thinking? Right now, what am I feeling? Where is my attention? Not to judge it, just to see it. And over time, days, weeks, months of this practice, you'll start to notice patterns, the same thoughts coming back, the same triggers, the same mental loops. And once you can see the pattern, you can interrupt it. That's the first step. Awareness. Without it, you're just a passenger in your own mind. With it, you reclaim the driver's seat. Epictetus taught his students, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But you can't choose your reaction if you're not aware you're reacting. You can't respond instead of react if you can't see the difference between the two. So start there. Start with awareness. It's the foundation of everything that follows. 2. The law of attention. Your attention is the most valuable resource you have. Not your time, not your money, your attention. Because attention is the currency of consciousness. Whatever you give your attention to grows. Whatever you starve of attention withers. And right now, in this moment, there's a battle raging for that attention. And most people are losing. They're giving it away to algorithms, to notifications, to news cycles designed to trigger outrage, to social media platforms engineered to keep them scrolling, to mental loops that serve nothing but anxiety. And every moment of attention given to something that doesn't build you is a moment stolen from something that does. The disciplined understand this deeply. They treat their attention like gold. They guard it, protect it, allocate it strategically. Because they know where attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, life grows. Think about your last hour. Where did your attention go? Was it chosen or hijacked? Were you directing it toward something meaningful, or was it just bouncing from stimulus to stimulus, reacting to whatever grabbed it next? For most people, it's the latter. They wake up and immediately check their phone. Their attention gets captured by emails, messages, news, social media, and before they've even gotten out of bed, they've given away their mental energy to 1,000 things that don't matter. And then they wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, drained, because attention isn't infinite, it's finite, limited. And when you're giving it to everything, you're giving it to nothing. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." The same applies to attention. It's not that you don't have enough attention, it's that you're bleeding it in 1,000 directions. The law of attention demands that you become ruthless about what gets access to your mind. Not every notification deserves a response. Not every thought deserves to be followed. Not every worry deserves to be entertained. You must learn to say no. Not just to external demands, but to internal ones. When your mind wants to replay that conversation from 3 days ago, no. When it wants to catastrophize about something that hasn't happened, no. When it wants to scroll, distract, numb, no. This isn't suppression, it's direction. You're not denying the thought exists. You're choosing not to feed it. Because here's what happens when you feed anxious thoughts with attention. They multiply, they grow, they become more insistent. But when you acknowledge them without engaging, "I see you, anxiety, but I'm not following you down that path," they fade. The mind is like a child seeking attention. Give it to the tantrum, and the tantrums increase. Calmly acknowledge it, but don't reward it, and the behavior changes. Most people have never learned this skill. They think they have to follow every thought, engage with every emotion, address every mental spiral, and so they spend their lives chasing their own tails. But the disciplined have learned to direct their attention consciously. They decide what deserves their focus and what doesn't. And that decision, repeated thousands of times a day, shapes their entire reality. Because reality isn't what happens to you, it's what you pay attention to. Two people can experience the same event. One focuses on what they lost, the other on what they learned. Same event, different reality, because they directed their attention differently. This is power, real power. The power to choose your experience by choosing your focus. And it starts with this simple question, asked throughout your day. Is this where I want my attention right now? If the answer is no, redirect. Gently, without judgment, just redirect. You're training a muscle, the muscle of conscious attention, and like any muscle, it gets stronger with use. Start small. Choose one thing each day that gets your full attention. Maybe it's a conversation, maybe it's a task, maybe it's just sitting in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for a distraction. Give it your complete focus. Notice when your mind wanders. Bring it back. Not harshly, just firmly. Again and again. That's the practice. And over time, you'll notice something shift. You'll be less reactive, less scattered, more present, more alive. Because you've stopped giving your attention away for free. You've started treating it like what it is, the foundation of your mental sovereignty. Chapter 3. The Law of Interpretation. Nothing is good or bad. Only your thinking makes it so. That's not philosophy. That's neuroscience. Your brain doesn't experience reality directly. It experiences your interpretation of reality. And that interpretation is built from beliefs, past experiences, cultural conditioning, and 100 other factors that have nothing to do with what's actually happening. Two people lose their job. One sees it as failure, proof they're not good enough, the beginning of a downward spiral. The other sees it as liberation, an opportunity to pursue something better, a necessary ending to something that wasn't serving them. Same event, completely different meanings. And those meanings will determine their actions, their emotions, their outcomes. This is the law of interpretation. You don't react to events. You react to your interpretation of events. And that interpretation is always a choice. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. He wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." Read that carefully. He's not saying nothing bad happens. He's saying your relationship with what happens is up to you. You can experience the same setback as devastating or as informative, as the end or as a beginning, and that choice changes everything. Most people don't realize they're choosing. They think their interpretations are objective. They think this is terrible is a fact, not an opinion. They think their emotional response is inevitable, not optional, but it's not. It's always optional. When someone criticizes you, your mind immediately starts interpreting, "They don't respect me. They think I'm incompetent. This is an attack." And based on that interpretation, you respond, usually defensively, often emotionally. But what if you interpreted it differently? They're giving me feedback. This might help me improve, or maybe this says more about them than me. Same criticism, different interpretation, different response, different outcome. This is where most people give away their power. They let their default interpretations, usually negative, usually fear-based, run unchecked. And those interpretations create emotional states they don't want and reactions they later regret. But the disciplined have learned to catch interpretations before they solidify into reactions. Something happens. The mind starts generating meaning, but there's a pause, a question. What else could this mean? Am I assuming the worst? Is there another way to see this? That pause interrupts the automatic pattern. It creates choice where there was only reflex. Epictetus taught, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. Your judgment, your interpretation, your meaning-making. That's where the disturbance lives, not in the event itself. And if the disturbance lives in your interpretation, you can change it. Not by lying to yourself, not by toxic positivity, but by recognizing that your first interpretation is rarely the only one or the most accurate one. Your mind's default setting is threat detection. It's wired to assume the worst because your ancestors who assumed the best got eaten. But in the modern world, that setting creates unnecessary suffering. Someone doesn't text back immediately. Your mind, they're mad at me, they don't value me, this relationship is failing. Reality, they're busy, their phone died, they haven't seen it yet. But by the time you check these more likely interpretations, you've already been through 20 minutes of unnecessary anxiety. The practice is this: when something triggers a strong negative interpretation, pause. Write down your automatic interpretation, then force yourself to generate at least 2 alternatives. Not to convince yourself the positive interpretation is true, just to remind yourself that your first interpretation isn't necessarily accurate. It's just the fastest, most habitual pattern your mind defaults to. And over time, you'll start to notice how often your interpretations were wrong, how much suffering you created through meaning-making that had nothing to do with reality. This doesn't mean you become naive. It means you become flexible. You hold your interpretations lightly. You test them. You recognize them as constructs, not facts. And in that recognition, you reclaim power. Because if you're the one creating the meaning, you can create different meaning. You can choose interpretations that serve you instead of ones that drain you. That's not delusion. That's mastery. Chapter 4. The Law of Mental Discipline. Your mind is like a muscle. It does what you train it to do. If you train it to catastrophize, it will catastrophize automatically. If you train it to be grateful, it will find things to appreciate automatically. If you train it to be distracted, it will be scattered. If you train it to focus, it will concentrate. The question isn't whether your mind is being trained. It's being trained every moment. The question is, are you training it intentionally, or are you letting it be trained by default? Most people are in the second category. They let their environment, their media consumption, their social circle train their mind without ever consciously choosing the training program. And then, they wonder why their mind feels like chaos. The law of mental discipline says, you must actively train your mind or it will be trained for you. And most of what's trying to train it is not in your best interest. The Stoics practiced this daily. They had specific mental exercises, premeditatio malorum, imagining worst-case scenarios to remove their power, the view from above, zooming out to see problems in perspective, morning and evening reviews, examining their thoughts and actions. These weren't hobbies. They were training, deliberate, structured mental conditioning, because they understood a mind left untrained will default to chaos, anxiety, distraction. But a mind trained through practice becomes a tool you can rely on. So what does mental discipline look like in practice? It looks like meditation, not as spirituality, but as attention training, sitting with yourself, noticing when your mind wanders, bringing it back over and over. That's not relaxation, that's reps, mental reps, building the muscle of focus. It looks like journaling, getting the chaos out of your head and onto paper, examining your thought patterns, questioning your assumptions, creating distance between you and your mental noise. It looks like deliberate exposure to difficulty, choosing the hard conversation, the uncomfortable task, the thing you'd rather avoid. Because every time you do something difficult, you're training your mind that discomfort doesn't control you. It looks like controlling your information diet, being ruthless about what content you consume, because every piece of content you watch, read, scroll past, it's training your mind, teaching it what to value, what to fear, what to desire. Most people consume information like they consume fast food, mindlessly, constantly, whatever's available. And then they wonder why their mind feels sluggish and sick. But the disciplined are selective. They understand that input determines output. Garbage in, garbage out, quality in, quality out. Seneca warned, associate with people who are likely to improve you. The same applies to content. Associate with information, ideas, and media that improve your mind, or accept that your mind will be shaped by whatever you're feeding it. Mental discipline also means creating systems that support your goals. If you want to stop checking your phone first thing in the morning, you can't rely on willpower alone. You put your phone in another room. You create a barrier between the impulse and the action. That's structure supporting discipline. If you want to think more clearly, you create time for deep work. Protected time, no interruptions, no notifications, just you and the task. That's environment supporting focus. If you want to worry less, you create a worry window. 15 minutes a day where you allow yourself to worry about everything. Outside that window, postpone it. I'll think about that during my worry time. Sounds simple, but it trains your mind that anxiety doesn't get to run the show 24/7. It gets a designated time slot. And often, by the time that slot arrives, the worry has faded. These aren't tricks, they're training protocols. Ways of conditioning your mind to operate how you want it to operate, not how it defaults to operating. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Your mind is what you repeatedly think. Mental excellence is not a moment of clarity. It's a habit of directed thinking. And habits are built through repetition. Through choosing the disciplined thought over the easy thought, the focused action over the distracted one, the present moment over the mental replay or rehearsal, again and again and again, until it's not effort anymore, it's just who you are. That's the goal, not to fight your mind every day for the rest of your life, but to train it so well that the things that used to require constant effort become automatic. The focused mind, the calm response, the ability to sit with discomfort without reaching for escape. These become your defaults, not through force, but through training. The law of emotional sovereignty. You are not your emotions. This sounds obvious, but most People live as if they are. They feel angry and they become anger. They feel anxious and they become anxiety. They feel sad and they become sadness. There's complete identification, no separation. The emotion and the person merge, and suddenly the emotion is in control. But here's the truth. Emotions are weather. They come, they go, they intensify and fade. They're information, not instruction, signals, not commands. And the moment you understand that, the moment you can feel an emotion without being it, you reclaim sovereignty. This is what the Stoics meant by apatheia, not the absence of emotion, but the absence of being controlled by emotion, the ability to feel fully without being directed fully. You can be angry without acting on the anger. You can be anxious without being paralyzed by the anxiety. You can be sad without being consumed by the sadness, because you've created distance. You've learned to say, I'm experiencing anger, instead of I am angry. It's subtle, but it changes everything. When you say, I am angry, anger is your identity. It's running the show. Your actions will come from anger. Your words will be shaped by anger. And usually you will regret both. But when you say, I'm experiencing anger, you've stepped outside it. You're the observer. The anger is something passing through you, not defining you. And from that place of observation, you can choose how to respond. Maybe you express it. Maybe you examine it. Maybe you let it pass. But it's a choice, not a compulsion. Most people never learn this. They're completely at the mercy of their emotional states. Good mood, productive day. Bad mood, everything falls apart. But the disciplined have learned to decouple their actions from their emotional states. They feel the emotion. They acknowledge it, but they don't let it dictate their behavior. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That includes internal events. Emotions are internal events. They're happening inside you, but they're not you. And once you realize that, you gain incredible freedom, because you're no longer waiting to feel motivated before you act. You're no longer avoiding things because they trigger anxiety. You're no longer reactive because you've learned to respond from a place deeper than emotion. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you steady. It makes you reliable. It makes you someone who can be counted on regardless of how you feel. The practice is simple. When you feel a strong emotion, name it, out loud or in your head. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm experiencing anxiety. This is sadness. That act of naming creates the gap. It reminds you that you're not the emotion. You're the one experiencing it. Then ask, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Fear might be saying, there's risk here, prepare. Anger might be saying, a boundary was crossed, address it. Sadness might be saying, something ended, grieve it. Emotions have information, but they're not always right about what to do with that information. Fear might tell you to avoid, but the disciplined person feels the fear and does it anyway, because growth lives on the other side of fear. Anger might tell you to attack, but the disciplined person feels the anger and responds with clarity, because destruction rarely serves your long-term goals. Sadness might tell you to isolate, but the disciplined person feels the sadness and reaches out, because connection heals. You're taking the information from the emotion, but not the instruction. You're acknowledging what you feel while staying in control of what you do. That's emotional sovereignty. And it's one of the highest forms of mental mastery. Because when you're no longer controlled by your emotional weather, when you can move through anger, anxiety, sadness, joy, all of it, without being thrown off course, you become unshakable. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing controls you. 6. The law of repetition. Everything we've talked about, awareness, attention, interpretation, discipline, emotional sovereignty, none of it matters if you don't practice it. One moment of awareness doesn't rewire your brain. One good decision doesn't change your life. One day of discipline doesn't build mental mastery. It's repetition that changes everything. The mind is plastic. It can be reshaped. But that reshaping happens through repetition, not revelation. You don't read about these principles and suddenly your mind is mastered. You practice them daily, in the small moments, in the frustrations, the temptations, the triggers. That's where the transformation happens. Every time you notice a thought, instead of being lost in it, you're building awareness. Every time you redirect your attention from distraction to focus, you're building concentration. Every time you choose a different interpretation, you are building flexibility. Every time you feel an emotion without being controlled by it, you're building sovereignty. Small victories, invisible to everyone else, but compounding, because that's how the mind works. It's not dramatic leaps, it's tiny, consistent shifts that eventually create a completely different mental landscape. The Stoics knew this. They didn't philosophize once and call it done. They practiced daily. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, still wrote reminders to himself every morning, still examined his thoughts every evening, still worked on his mind until the day he died, not because he was weak, but because he understood. The mind requires maintenance. It requires daily tending. Leave it unchecked and it reverts to chaos. Most people expect immediate results. They try meditation for a week and quit because they're still anxious. They practice focus for a day and give up because they're still distracted, but they're missing the point. This isn't a quick fix. It's a lifelong practice, and the results come not from one session, but from 1,000. Not from trying hard once, but from trying lightly, consistently, forever. Epictetus taught, if you didn't learn these things in order to demonstrate them in practice, what did you learn them for? Knowledge without practice is entertainment. You might feel inspired, you might understand intellectually, but unless you're applying it in real time, in real situations, with real consequences, nothing changes. So here's what repetition looks like in practice. Every morning, before your feet hit the floor, you pause. You set your intention for the day. You remind yourself what you're training. Today, I'm practicing awareness. I'm noticing my thoughts without being them. Throughout the day, you catch yourself. Mind wandering, notice it, bring it back. Getting triggered, pause, observe, choose your response. Feeling overwhelmed, name the emotion, create distance. Every evening, you review. What did you notice about your mind today? Where did you lose control? Where did you maintain it? What can you do differently tomorrow? This isn't journaling for therapy. It's reviewing game film, examining your performance, learning from your mental patterns. And you do this again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not perfectly. You'll fail constantly. You'll get lost in thought. You'll react instead of respond. You'll forget to pause, to notice, to choose. That's not failure. That's the practice. Because the goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. And every time you notice you've been lost, you've just had a moment of awareness. That's a win. Over time, weeks, months, years, you'll notice something shift. The mental chaos that used to feel normal starts to feel foreign. The reactivity that used to be automatic becomes visible before it happens. The anxiety that used to run the show becomes just weather passing through. You haven't eliminated these things, but you've changed your relationship with them. And that changes everything. Because the mind you have today was built by the thoughts you repeated yesterday. The mind you'll have tomorrow will be built by the thoughts you repeat today. So repeat the right ones. Practice the right responses, train the right patterns, not once, not when you feel like it, every day. In the small moments, when no one's watching, that's how mastery is built. Not through intensity, but through consistency. Not through perfection, but through persistence. So what happens when you put all of this together, when you practice awareness daily, when you guard your attention like it's gold, when you question your interpretations instead of accepting them, when you train your mind deliberately, when you feel your emotions without being controlled by them, when you repeat these practices until they become who you are, you become something rare in a world of mental chaos, sovereign, not controlled. by your thoughts, not hijacked by your emotions, not scattered by distractions, not reactive to triggers, just steady, present, directed, and people feel it. They don't always understand it, but they feel it, that you're not like everyone else, that you're not constantly pulled in 1,000 directions, that you have a center they can't shake. Because you've built something most people never will, a disciplined mind. And a disciplined mind is an unconquerable fortress. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, the one place no external force can touch. No failure can breach it, no criticism can weaken it, no circumstance can control it, because it's yours, truly yours, built by you, for you through daily practice and relentless awareness. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming unshakable. Not because nothing affects you, but because you've learned to stay anchored regardless of what's happening around you or inside you. That's freedom, real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be who you choose to be, regardless of circumstances. And it starts now, not someday, not when things calm down. Now, this moment, the next thought you think, the next time you notice your mind wandering, the next trigger that tests you, that's your training ground. Right now, notice your mind. What's it doing? Where did it go while you were listening? What thoughts are running in the background? Just notice. No judgment, just awareness. That's the first step. That moment of noticing is you taking back control. And tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, before you start your day, pause, just for 30 seconds. Notice your mind. In mind, set your intention. Remind yourself, today I'm training mental sovereignty, and then practice. In the small moments, when frustration rises, when distraction pulls, when anxiety whispers, that's where the work is. Not in grand gestures, in tiny repeated choices to observe, instead of react, to direct instead of drift, to master instead of be mastered. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your worst prison. The choice has always been yours. Stay focused, stay aware, and remember, the quiet work you do inside your own mind is building the strength no one can touch.